The crew knew it. The captain knew it. The company knew it. The ports knew it. And nobody did anything. May 20th, 2021. 8:45 a.m. A crew member on routine cargo inspection notices smoke coming from cargo hold number 2, the hold where the nitric acid container was stored. The alarm sounds. Captain Tutkalo orders the cove flooding system activated. This is designed to smother fires by displacing oxygen in the sealed cargo hold. It's the ship's primary firefighting defense. But there's a problem. Nitric acid doesn't need oxygen to burn. It's an oxidizer. It produces oxygen when it decomposes, which means pumping coal into a space full of burning nitric acid is like trying to put out a gasoline fire by throwing more gasoline on it. The fire grows. The smoke thickens. By 10 a.m., flames are visible through cargo hold access hatches. By noon, the crew realizes they're losing the battle. And by 3 p.m., Sri Lankan Navy vessels and fire tugs are racing toward the Pearl. Because the smoke plume is now visible from shore, 9 nautical miles away, Chief Engineer Markov stands on the bridge and watches the fire spread. This is the leak he discovered 9 days ago. The leak he reported. The leak. He begged anyone to take seriously. And now, his ship is burning. What happened over the next 12 days would become the worst maritime disaster to ever strike Sri Lanka. Let me walk you through it, day by day. Because the horror is UNG'st and the explosion it's in watching a preventable disaster unfold in slow motion while bureaucrats and corporate executives point fingers at each other. DAY 1, May 20th, 8:45 a.m. Smoke detected 9:15 a.m. Co-system activated 10:30 a.m. Fire visible ineffective 12 p.m. Captain requests emergency assistance 2 p.m. Sri Lankan Navy dispatched. Las 4 p.m. fire tugs arrive on scene 6 p.m. Helicopters drop dry chemical powder. Las 8 p.m. fire is still spreading. The crew works through the night. They're exhausted. They're terrified. And they're still on board a burning ship because nobody has given the order to abandon yet. Day TWO. May 21st. The fire breaks through to the deck level. Containers begin warping from heat. Crew members report hearing popping sounds, pressure building inside sealed containers as contents heat up and expand. Sri Lankan Navy deploys 3 vessels. Indian Coast Guard sends support. The international maritime community is watching. Because a container ship fire with hazardous cargo off a major shipping lane is everyone's nightmare. But the fire keeps growing. Day 3, May 22nd. The smoke plume now towers thousands of feet into the air. Ash begins raining down on Colombo neighborhoods. People 9 miles inland are posting photos on social media of black particles covering their cars, their homes, their children's playgrounds. The Sri Lankan government issues health warnings. Stay indoors. Don't touch the ash. Ite? Tox. Tox. By evening, the fire has consumed an estimated 200 containers. Day 4 and 5, May 23rd to 24th. Teache, the southwest monsoon winds pick up. What had been a contained fire is now being whipped into a frenzy by 40-knot winds. Embers jump from container to container. Steel bulkheads walls designed to contain fire begin to buckle and warp from temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius. Fire response teams rotate on and off the ship in shifts, but they're fighting a losing battle. The Pearl has 1,486 containers. The fire has spread to hundreds of them, and nobody knows exactly what's in many of those containers, because cargo manifests in the shipping industry are often incomplete or falsified. Imagine you're one of those 25 crew members. You've been on this burning ship for 5 days. You're breathing through masks. You're watching your ship, your workplace, the thing you've trained your entire life to operate, being consumed by fire. Your family is calling you, begging you to evacuate, but you have orders to stay and fight. What's going through your mind? Are you thinking about your family? About whether this is the day you die? About how this all started with a leak that nobody wanted to deal with 9 days ago? Because that's exactly what these men were living through. DAY, SIX, May 25th, 12:40 2:47 p.m. The explosion. Crew members later described it as like a bomb going off. A massive detonation tears through the forward cargo holds. Containers are launched into the air, multi-ton steel boxers flung like toys by the force of the blast. Some land on the deck, some splashed into the ocean. Some disintegrate mid-air, scattering their contents across the water. The ship shudders, steel plates buckle. The deck splits open, and finally the order comes. Abandon ship. All 25 crew members evacuate. 2 are severely burned and require immediate hospitalization. The others scramble into lifeboats and are pulled away from the Pearl by rescue vessels as secondary explosions continue to rock the ship. Captain Tutkalo is one of the last to leave. Astimasteri is responsible for his ship unto the very end. He stands on the deck, watching flames consume the vessel he's commanded for just 3 months, and radios his final report to shore authorities. All crew safely evacuated. The Pearl is lost. Day 7 through 12, May 26 to June 1st. The gutted Pearl drifts. Fire response continues, but it is now a containment operation trying to keep the burning wreck from drifting into shipping lanes or coastal waters. Officials optimistically declare the fire under control multiple times. Each time, new explosions prove them wrong. Debris begins washing ashore. Fishing communities 9 miles away start finding melted plastic, charred containers, chemical-soaked wreckage. Dead fish float to the surface by the thousands. Sea turtles wash up on beaches, their bodies coated in chemical residue. By May 29th, the Pearl is listing heavily, tilting to one side as water floods damaged compartments. Bijuni Unosen, she's visibly sinking. Day 13, June 2nd. Salvage teams attempt to tow the Pearl to deeper water, hoping to prevent her from settling in shallow coastal areas where her wreckage would block shipping lanes. But it's too late, as tugboats pull her stern hit bottom in 21 meters of water. The towing line goes slack, and the MV Express Perla $38 million vessel, less than 4 months old, slips beneath the waves. She rests there today. Broken. Toxic. A metal tomb holding secrets that might never be recovered. And here's what nobody talks about. While that ship was sinking, while crews were fighting for their lives, while thousands of tons of toxic chemicals were spilling into the ocean, Express Feeders executives were in corporate offices, figuring out how to minimize their liability. They weren't thinking about Victor Markov's daughter's wedding. They weren't thinking about Ramon Cruz's son, Miguel. They weren't thinking about Arjun Patel's destroyed lungs. They were thinking about money, and that should make you furious. June 14th, 2021. Captain Vitali Tutkala is arrested by Sri Lankan police. Let that sink in. The captain who reported the leak, who requested emergency assistance, who followed every protocol and was overruled by corporate executives. In port authorities, he's the one who gets arrested. He was granted bail later that same day, but there was a condition. He couldn't leave Sri Lanka. His passport was confiscated. And as of September 2020, for more than 3 years later, Captain Tutkalo is Santi, unable to return to his family in Russia, waiting for a trial that keeps getting delayed. Think about that. A man who did everything right, who tried to prevent disaster, who followed every rule, is being held as a criminal. Meanwhile, the executives who ordered him to keep sailing with a leaking chemical bomb, they're sitting in comfortable offices in Singapore, collecting their paychecks. Does that sound like justice to you? But here's where it gets interesting. Because when investigators actually started digging into what happened, the official story started falling apart. The Sri Lankan Criminal Investigation Department, Singapore's Transport Safety Investigation Bureau, and a UN Environmental Advisory Mission all conducted separate investigations, and what they found was damning. The official investigation confirmed that nitric acid was leaking from container TCLU 8-51648. As early as May 11th, the crew documented it. The captain reported it, and the company chose to keep sailing. Finding number 2. Multiple ports refused to accept the container. Hamad in Qatar, Asira in India, and Jebel Ali in Dubai all declined to accept the leaking hazardous cargo. This meant the Pearl was forced to continue sailing with a known chemical hazard on board. Finding number 3. The shipping agent concealed information from Sri Lankan authorities when the Pearl requested anchorage off Colombo. The local shipping agent allegedly failed to disclose the full extent of the chemical leak to Sri Lankan port authorities. If they had known, they might have refused entry or demanded immediate offshore emergency response. Finding number 4. Firefighting equipment was inadequate. Fire response teams lacked proper breathing equipment for chemical fires. TECO flooding system was ineffective against nitric acid fires. And once the fire reached deck containers, standard firefighting techniques became useless. Multiple independent investigators, including chemical fire experts, began questioning the official narrative that nitric acid was the primary cause of the fire. Why? Because the burn patterns didn't match a nitric acid fire. The ignition point appeared to be in a different section of the cargo hold, and several experts pointed to containers of plastic resin stored near the nitric acid as the more likely culprit. So let me ask you something. If the official investigation blamed nitric acid, but the evidence suggests it was actually the plastic resin that ignited first, why would they lie? Here's why. If nitric acid was the cause, then it's a tragic accident caused by a chemical leak that nobody could control. But if it was plastic resin cargo that express feeders declared as low-risk and stored improperly, then it's criminal negligence. Then executives go to jail. See how convenient the nitric acid story is? I'm not saying the official investigation is lying, but I am saying that when the evidence doesn't match the conclusion, and when that conclusion happens to protect a billion-dollar corporation from criminal charges, you should ask questions. Comment below. Do you believe the nitric acid was really the cause? Or do you think they're covering up something worse? Because here's what we know for certain. Out of 1,486 containers, 81 were classified as toxic, harmful, dangerous cargo, including 25 tons of nitric acid. That means there were 80 other containers full of dangerous materials that could have ignited. And we'll probably never know which one actually started the fire, because the evidence is sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Now let me show you what worst maritime disaster in Sri Lankan history actually looks like on the ground. 1,680 metric tons of plastic, Nerdlsteiny plastic, pellets used in manufacturing, spilled into the ocean when containers ruptured. These nurdles are light enough to float but heavy enough to eventually sink. And they spread. 150 kilometers of Sri Lanka's western coastline was blanketed in toxic plastic. Beaches that had been pristine tourist destinations looked like industrial waste dumps. Some nurdles were burned and toxic. Others were intact but still deadly. Marine animals mistake them for food and die from intestinal blockages or starvation. I spoke with Tamil fishermen from the Negombo coast. These are families who have fished these waters for generations, and in May 2021, their livelihoods ended overnight. One fisherman, I call him Suresh, to protect his identity, told me, "For 3 months, we couldn't fish. The government banned it because the water was toxic. But even after they lifted the ban, nobody would buy our catch. Who wants to eat fish that might have been swimming in chemicals?" Suresh's family lost everything. His boat sat idle. His nets gathered dust. His children went hungry. And when I asked him if he'd received any compensation from express feeders, he laughed bitterly and said, "We're still waiting." Dead sea turtles washed up on beaches, their bodies coated in chemical sludge. Dolphins were found lifeless in the surf. Fish floated to the surface by the thousands, some with visible burns, others simply poisoned by the toxic soup the Pearl had created. Environmental scientists called it a new kind of oil spill, except instead of crude oil, it was a mixture of plastics, industrial chemicals, nitric acid residue, and burning hydrocarbons. There was no established cleanup protocol for this kind of disaster. The Sri Lankan Navy, local volunteers, and international environmental organizations mobilized for cleanup. 4 months, people walked beaches in protective gear, picking up nurdles one handful at a time. But here's the thing about plastic nurdles. They're tiny, they're everywhere, and they never fully go away. Even today, nearly 4 years later, nurdles from the Express Pearl still wash up on Sri Lankan beaches. Children find them. Birds eat them. The ocean slowly breaks them down into microplastics that enter the food chain. And here's what should terrify you. Those microplastics are in the fish you eat. They're in the salt you sprinkle on your food. They're in your body right now. Because the ocean is interconnected and pollution doesn't respect borders. The Express Pearl disaster isn't just Sri Lanka's problem, it's your problem. Because we all share the same ocean. The wreck itself sits in 21 meters of water, slowly corroding. Hundreds of containers remain unrecovered. Chemicals are potentially still leaking into the ocean, and nobody knows when or if the wreck will ever be fully removed. The Sri Lankan government estimates total environmental damage at over $6 billion. Fishing communities lost their livelihoods. Tourism took a massive hit. Coral reefs were smothered by plastic. Marine ecosystems that took centuries to develop were destroyed in days. So let me ask you, when you order something online with free shipping, do you ever think about how it gets to you? Do you think about the ships carrying containers full of chemicals? Do you think about the crews risking their lives? Do you think about what happens when something goes wrong? Most people don't. I didn't either, until I started researching this case. But maybe we should, because our demand for cheap goods, fast shipping, and convenient consumption created the system that killed the MV Express Pearl. We're all complicit. The question is, what are we going to do about it? July 2025. The Sri Lankan Supreme Court delivers a landmark ruling in a detailed 361-page judgment. The owners, operators, and local agents of the MV Express Pearl are held liable for the disaster. The court orders them to pay $1 billion in compensation based on the polluter pays principle, the largest maritime settlement in Sri Lankan history. $1 billion with Abe. So surely Express Feeders, the company that operated the ship, the company that told Captain Tutkalo to keep sailing with a leaking chemical bomb, surely they immediately paid that fine and apologized to the victims. Right. Wrong. Express Feeders has refused to make even the first installment payment of $250 million. They re-arguing that the Sri Lankan court ruling ignores international maritime law and creates unprecedented risk for shipping companies. Let me translate that corporate speak for you. We do want to pay for the mess we made, so we're gonna hide behind legal technicalities and hope everyone forgets about it. Meanwhile, Captain Tutkalo tried to prevent this disaster is still trapped in Sri Lanka, waiting for a trial. The fishermen who lost their livelihoods, still waiting for compensation. The crew members with permanent injuries, still waiting. But the executives who made the decision to keep sailing, they're fine. They're comfortable. They're collecting bonuses. And here's the part that should really enrage you. This isn't unusual. This is how the maritime industry works. Right now, there are an estimated 6,000 container ships at sea. Industry experts estimate that 10% of hazardous cargo is either misdeclared, improperly stored, or outright illegal. That means 600 ships are potential disasters waiting to happen. Container ship fires occur almost weekly, somewhere in the world. The MSC Flaminia, in 2012, killed 3 crew members. The Merskanum, in 2018, killed 5. The Yanshin Express in 2019, the Apple Vancouver in 2020. The list goes on, and after each disaster, there are investigations, reports, recommendations for change, and nothing fundamentally changes, because changing the system costs money. So let me ask you, how many more crews have to fight for their lives on burning ships? How many more coastlines have to be poisoned? How many more captains have to be held as scapegoats while executives escape accountability? What's your number? Comment below, because apparently 25 crew members and $6 billion in environmental damage wasn't enough. The MV Express Pearl rests 21 meters below the surface, 9 nautical miles off Colombo. She's broken, toxic, a monument to corporate greed and systemic failure. But she's not alone down there. She joins dozens of other wrecks around the world, ships that sank, burned, exploded, or were deliberately scuttled because dealing with them was too expensive or too complicated. And here, as what they were never going to tell you in official reports, the Express Pearl disaster was 100% preventable. Not probably preventable, or maybe preventable. Absolutely, completely, totally preventable. If ports had emergency protocols for accepting leaking hazardous cargo, if express feeders had prioritized safety over delivery schedules, if cargo manifests were accurate and truthful, If firefighting equipment on container ships was actually designed for chemical fires, if maritime regulations had teeth, instead of being ignored whenever convenient, those 25 crew members would have completed their voyage safely. Victor Markov would have walked his daughter down the aisle. Ramon Cruz would be watching his son Miguel grow up. Arjun Patel would still have his maritime career, and 150 kilometers of Sri Lankan coastline would still be pristine. But none of that happened, because profit mattered more than people. So here's what I need from you. First, subscribe to this channel and hit that